"Ma'am," I said, "step back immediately. I am 72 years old. My knees do not move that quickly. Let me call my son." "Kevin, baby, it is me." They pushed a 72-year-old church lady to the ground, and they believed it was finished until her son, a quiet man with a military background, arrived and stirred the entire city. Eleanor Baines was not in any hurry. She had just finished saying farewell to the women's group at Mount Olive Baptist, the very church she had been attending every Sunday for 43 years. Her friend, Mrs. Mildred Griggs, was supposed to give her a ride home as usual. Eleanor stood just outside the small brick building wearing her beige Sunday hat, holding a slim brown cane in one hand and her Bible in the other. It was around 6:12 in the evening, the air still heavy with the thick Alabama heat even though it was late September. She noticed blue and red lights shining on the nearby chain-link fence. 2 police cars had stopped a worn Nissan approximately 40 feet from the church parking lot. She did not think much of it, assuming it was just another routine traffic stop. However, she then heard shouting not from the driver, but from the officers. She slowly turned her head, not out of curiosity, but concern. One of the officers, a young white man with a slim build, was giving contradictory orders.
"Hands out the window," he commanded firmly. Then barely 5 seconds later, "Get out of the car now!" The young man inside the vehicle, barely a teenager, froze in place, his hands shaking.
Several church members were watching too, but no one dared to approach. Everyone understood how quickly situations could unravel nowadays. Eleanor shouted. "Be careful now, just like a mother would," her voice gentle yet clear. That was all she said. Suddenly, she sensed the focus shift. One of the officers, who was not shouting, turned around and walked toward her. "You need to step back, ma'am," he said, gesturing with his hand. "I'm just standing by the church steps," Eleanor responded, hardly moving and refusing to cross any boundary. The officer instructed her again to move back, this time with more authority. But she felt it was unnecessary since she was not close to the trouble and posed no danger. The church steps had always represented a sanctuary, not a place of suspicion. He advanced another step. "I said, move back, ma'am. I am 72 years old, son. My knees do not move that fast," she said with a faint smile, still attempting to calm the situation, unaware of what was to come. Then everything happened quickly, too quickly. The officer reached for her cane. "You need to move now. I am moving, child." Before she could finish, he yanked the cane. Eleanor stumbled as her right foot gave way on the pavement, her entire body collapsing. She fell hard. Her hat tumbled off. Her Bible struck the concrete along with her head. Her head hit the curb with a sound that caused every witness to hold their breath for a moment. The video lasts only 47 seconds, filmed by a teenager across the street. The footage is not shaky, but heartbreakingly steady. You can plainly observe Eleanor lying motionless, one hand twitching as if she is trying to gather herself. Before her body betrays her, you hear someone shout, "Why did you do that?" She did nothing wrong. Another voice instructs to call for an ambulance. But what captures attention most in the recording is not the fall, nor the gasps or the sound of sirens in the distance. It is what Eleanor says afterward. Her voice is faint and rough, yet it slices through the turmoil sharply. She says, "Let me make one call. Just one." One of the officers attempts to interrupt her, but she insists, "Let me call my son." They allow her, likely assuming it will not change anything, perhaps thinking she has no one capable of helping. She dials a single number, no contacts or voice commands, only pure muscle memory. He answers on the second ring. She says his name once, just once, and everything begins to shift. However, no one at the scene understands who Eleanor's son truly is. Kevin Baines responded to the phone as he always did when his mother called. "Hey, Ma." Nobody else heard her words, but whatever was said calmed the atmosphere inside his home. The ceiling fan kept rotating quietly, yet Kevin remained still for 5 seconds, staring out of the window in his modest house on 2 acres near Temple, Texas. A look he hadn't worn for years appeared on his face. He did not ask any questions, and did not need to. He simply said, "All right," and hung up. Within the next 10 minutes, he changed his shirt and grabbed a worn duffel bag from the back of his closet, ready for what was to come. He only threw in the essentials: 2 cell phones, a USB drive, and an old folder wrapped in plastic. He did not pack any clothes. By the time his neighbor, an elderly man named Bill who owned the nearby scrapyard, waved from his porch, Kevin was already driving his truck east on Interstate 20. It was roughly 7:09 in the evening. No one in town knew much about Kevin. He had returned a few years ago, kept to himself, fixed fences after storms, secretly donated to the middle school's broken water system, and volunteered with the VFW when requested. Yet no one ever inquired about his history. They simply respected his quietude. What remained unknown was that Kevin Baines had not just served. He had been deployed a dozen times across 4 continents, fluent in languages unfamiliar to most Americans. He had been in meetings where names were never spoken, only nods. Missions without any paper trail, clean removals, and silent conclusions. He had left all that behind when his father passed away and relocated to be near Eleanor, hoping to live a normal life. But that existence had become a thing of the past. Crossing into Mississippi shortly after 11 at night, he did not stop for fuel until almost reaching Tuscaloosa. Once back on the highway, he made a single call. Not to a friend or family member, but to a contact saved as Auric. A raspy voice answered with no greeting, just heavy breathing. "I need you to look up a badge number," Kevin said, pausing before adding, "Which city?" "Birmingham Police Department." An officer was present at a traffic stop outside Mount Olive Baptist tonight when he put his hands on Eleanor. Another brief pause occurred between 6 and 7 o'clock. The name was not mentioned on the recording, but the badge showed 6543. "I will send it in an hour." "Not enough. I need everything. Previous records, complaint history. Send it to my private inbox encrypted." "Understood. No goodbye. Just click." By the time Kevin crossed into Alabama, the message had already been received by Officer Alan Detmer, a rookie with 2 years on the job who had been transferred from Gadsden Police Department. After a misconduct investigation that had quietly concluded with no charges, Kevin showed no reaction. He simply filed the information where it belonged, in the expanding list of names. At 3 in the morning, he arrived at the parking lot of the very hospital where Eleanor had been taken. Instead of heading towards the emergency room entrance, he walked straight through the side doors near the loading dock. He knew no one would prevent him from entering. The night nurse glanced up as Kevin calmly asked without raising his voice, "Eleanor Baines, where is she? Is she stable?" "Room 204 West Wing," she replied, but he was already moving. When he opened the door to her room, Eleanor was conscious. Her left temple was covered with a thick white bandage. She had an IV in one arm and her cane resting beside the bed, but her eyes were clear, tired, yet steady. "Hey, baby," she said softly. He crossed over and kissed her forehead, then pulled a chair close and sat down silently. After a minute, he finally asked, "Are you all right?" She nodded slowly, admitting it could have been far worse. He gently took her hand, assuring her, "I'm going to make this right." Eleanor neither smiled nor argued. "Are you sure?" she asked, already anticipating the reply. Kevin simply responded, "Yes, ma'am." She exhaled and closed her eyes briefly before opening them once more. "I didn't raise you for revenge, Dee." "I know," she said softly. He quickly added, "This is not about that." She chose not to question him further. It was unnecessary. He stayed by her side until sunrise, but before the morning light slipped through the blinds, Kevin had already mapped out his first step. By precisely 7:22 in the morning, Kevin stood where everything had unfolded. He was at the church parking lot's edge beside the cracked pavement where Eleanor's hat had fallen. There was no need to imagine the scene any longer since he had watched the footage 6 times on his way here. Every angle, body position, and officer's action was dissected thoroughly like a critical briefing. Reverend Carl Ingram appeared, carrying a cup filled with black coffee, offering it silently to Kevin. Their acquaintance dated back many years, not close friends but familiar enough. "She is still resting," the Reverend mentioned softly. "Yes," Kevin affirmed while scanning the area. "She said you tried to intervene." "I did," he confessed. "They told me to back off or face arrest, claiming I was disrupting a lawful stop." Kevin took a deliberate sip from the coffee and glanced at the camera fixed on a crooked utility pole across the street. "Do you think it actually works?" he asked. The Reverend gave a bitter chuckle. "Only when they want it to. I'm going to find out," Kevin said before walking away. Before the Reverend could say another word, he drove directly to the South Precinct of the Birmingham Police Department, a modest red brick structure nestled between a pawn shop and an auto parts store. He entered wearing denim pants, an old faded shirt, and carried an unsettling calmness that made people uneasy without understanding the reason. The officer at the desk looked up and asked, "Can I assist you?" He replied, "Yes, I need to talk to whoever is responsible for the Kevin incident from last night." The officer blinked in surprise. Pardon me? Alan Detmer, badge 654-3. He was involved in a use of force situation outside Mount Olive Baptist. The officer replied. Sir, I am not sure about that. He said firmly. I'm not here to argue. I want to speak with the watch commander. The officer offered. I can take your name and contact details. Kevin leaned forward slightly and said, or you could connect me right now. The younger officer hesitated before answering the phone. 10 minutes later, Lieutenant Ronald Green arrived. He appeared as a man accustomed to authority, with broad shoulders, a firm jawline, and a crisp uniform. He extended his hand, but Kevin did not accept it. You are the one calling? The lieutenant inquired. Yes, I've heard about the situation. It is under investigation. It is not, Kevin responded. I checked the records this morning. No formal report was submitted. Your officer left the scene before the paramedics arrived. The fall was not documented, and no video evidence was provided. That is not an investigation. It is a cover-up. Lieutenant Green's expression changed slightly. Now wait, I am certain that is not the whole story. Kevin handed a printed copy of the video transcript to him. That is your officer taking a cane from a 72-year-old woman. Eleanor posed no danger, yet after being knocked onto the pavement, she ended up in the hospital. Before your department even recorded the stop, Green glanced at the paper and then back at Kevin. We will investigate this if you want to submit a formal grievance. I do not submit complaints, Kevin replied calmly. I gather evidence. There was a brief pause before Green's voice grew more resolute. Listen, I understand you are frustrated, but barging in here is not how things work. If you have concerns, there is a proper procedure. Kevin offered a faint smile. Let me explain something, Lieutenant. I have sat face to face with warlords. I have seen men lie with a grin while their hands remained stained. Do you think I don't recognize the scent of a cover-up? Your officer believed no one would care about an elderly black woman with a cane. He was mistaken. Green clenched his jaw. This is not helping your case. I am not building a case. I am generating pressure. Kevin began to leave but paused. One more thing. Tell Detmer not to erase anything from his phone. If any files disappear, I will personally subpoena his cloud backups. Silence filled the room until Kevin's footsteps faded behind the closing door. By the time he reached his truck, he had already sent the video to 4 different encrypted servers and 2 trusted attorneys. His visit was not merely a statement. It was a warning that he was watching and was not alone. By mid-afternoon, Kevin sat in the hospital room beside his mother's bed as she lightly slept. He kept the blinds partially drawn while the fierce Alabama sun beat against the windows. However, his attention remained fixed on his phone as he had already charted the call records of the officers present at the scene. One of them sent 2 messages immediately after the event, one to a supervisor and the other to a private contact Kevin did not recognize, though he planned to discover who owned that number soon. At approximately 3:12 p.m., a knock sounded at the door and a woman appeared, with sharp eyes and hair tightly pulled back into a bun. Mr. Baines? She asked. Yes, I am, he replied, standing up. She introduced herself. I am Sergeant Kristen Malone from Internal Affairs. She extended her hand, and this time he accepted with a brief handshake. I am conducting a preliminary review and wanted to check on your mother. She is resting, and I will not take long, Malone said, entering the room. I have been assigned to clarify what transpired, and you are here for accountability, she added. When Kevin questioned her, she met his gaze directly. I am here to follow protocol. Then we are not having a real conversation, he said, blinking. Excuse me? I do not trust your process, he continued evenly. The officer who put my mother in this condition was shielded by those very procedures. Just 1 year ago, I examined his previous record. Mr. Baines, I recognize you are upset, she said softly. I am not upset, he interrupted firmly. She shifted her stance. There is a way to manage this situation. You can file a complaint and cooperate with the internal review. That is how things get resolved. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. No, Sergeant. That is how this gets covered up. He walks away with a slap on the wrist, paperwork disappears, and in half a year he is stopping someone else's mother. For a moment, Sergeant Malone did not answer. Then she responded. You are not wrong, but there is a procedure I must follow. Kevin nodded and said, You do what you need to. I will do the same. As she walked away, Eleanor murmured, That is a cop. Yes, Kevin answered. She means well. I think that matters. No, he whispered. Not anymore. Outside the hospital, Kevin settled into a secluded booth at Miller's Cafe, a small dusty spot with few visitors that afternoon. He opened his laptop and began retrieving documents. Not from public sources, but from a private archive he had built over time after witnessing numerous incidents like this. He connected records of badges, arrests, inconsistencies, and internal transfers. Then he sent an email with the subject line reading Incident 9.27 Mount Olive BPD South Precinct Excessive Force. Attached were a video, transcript, officer records, and a timeline. The message went to 3 news offices, 1 local and 2 national, and he did not include his name. Then, he dialed someone he had not spoken to in 5 years. The voice answered on the second ring. Kevin, I need eyes on Birmingham. The voice on the other end laughed softly. Still avoiding small talk, I see. Still no time for it? Kevin replied, Can you assist? You know I need Galloway. Remember his photographic memory. I also need Terrell. You know what kind of situation this is. The voice grew silent, then said, How soon? And how is your mother's recovery? She is strong, doing well. By nightfall, Galloway and Terrell were on the road. Originally from Tallahassee and Chattanooga respectively, they were no longer part of the military, not dressed in uniform. Yet their expertise remained intact. Bill took charge of communications and legal matters while Terrell focused on technology and extracting records. Kevin was not looking for brute force, but needed influence. That night, he sat outside the hospital watching the street lamps flicker above weary storefronts and dimming advertisements. His goal was not to dominate the city or cause destruction. He sought responsibility. Yet what he understood, and what the city had not realized, was that silence only holds power when no one is paying attention. Now, people were beginning to listen. It was no longer just the general public observing. Eyes within the department were also starting to change. Bill never knocked when he arrived, and that was no different this time. Kevin opened the motel room door and wordlessly stepped aside. Bill entered carrying a tan canvas bag, his left leg slightly limping from a break sustained years ago during Olo 8 that never properly healed. He appeared older, with more pronounced crow's feet and thinner hair, but his intellect remained as sharp as when they undertook missions in Jordan. You look just like before, Bill commented as he set the bag down. You do not, Kevin replied. They shared a brief, quiet laugh. Something familiar. Terrell called, saying he was about 30 minutes away with the equipment. Kevin nodded and pushed a folder across the table. That's the officer. Alan Detmer was fast-tracked through the academy because his father's cousin manages procurement in Jefferson County. He had gotten reported last year for roughly handling a 14-year-old, though I lost the footage, Galloway quickly added. Jesus, he is not the only one. Kevin said there is a pattern in this precinct. Excessive use of force cases. I mapped out 5 incidents in the past year alone, mostly involving older individuals who are black and poor, with no legal protection. Galloway glanced up and added, Now they messed with Eleanor. That was their big mistake. When Terrell showed up, it was just after 9 in the evening. He did not waste any time. He unpacked 2 laptops, a portable scanner, and a modified Wi-Fi interceptor that fit inside a shoebox. He smiled as he placed it on the table, saying, Let us see what these fools have been hiding. Kevin pointed toward the wall. The police department's internal network is 5 blocks that way. Keep it clean, no active interference. We are just listening. Copy that, Terrell said while already typing. Once we identify the chain of command, Galloway added, we can push quietly to get people talking and make them anxious enough to slip up. Without being told, Kevin leaned back and said he had already started. That footage went public last night. The public reaction is slow since they are testing the waters, as usual, Galloway explained, until it hits the right nerve. While they were working, Eleanor sat alone in the hospital watching the local news. Nothing was on the broadcast yet, but she knew it was only a matter of time. She had seen that look in Kevin's eyes earlier that morning. It was the same expression he had worn at his father's funeral. A quiet resilience, Yes, but something colder simmering just beneath the surface at 10:45 p.m. Kevin and the team uncovered internal messages. One was marked confidential and high priority, sent from the precinct's deputy chief to a select group of officers. It stated, "Do not share body cam footage. Do not make any public statements. The narrative will be managed. Remind all staff to align their statements if the press contacts you." Bill leaned back, feeling disgusted they were closing ranks. Kevin responded, "Then we will ignite the wagons." Over the next hour they assembled a chain not of accusations, but solid proof. Every officer who received the message, their links to prior complaints, the clerk who modified timestamps, the medic who accidentally left out head trauma from Eleanor's ER record. It was all laid bare. No guesswork, just cold, unchallengeable facts. At midnight, Kevin sent another message, this time to a contact in D.C. who owed him a favor from their time in Kandahar. Not in law enforcement, not a politician. A journalist, someone unafraid to handle uncomfortable truths. He attached the chain of messages, the video, the history of cover-ups. The reply arrived 4 minutes later. "I will be on the 6 a.m. flight." Kevin closed his laptop. They wanted silence. He said, "We will bring a crowd." The next morning, posters appeared throughout the city. Black and white printouts showing a screenshot from the video, Eleanor lying on the pavement underneath it. The question, "Ask Birmingham PD why this woman is hospitalized." The signs demanding justice for Eleanor were not professionally produced. They lacked glossiness, yet appeared everywhere, taped to bus stop walls, pinned on barbershop windows, slipped beneath windshield wipers, and scattered around grocery store parking areas. The police department offered no official statement, and that silence was what pushed people to begin raising questions. This was not merely a public relations crisis unfolding. Rather, it marked the onset of an internal unraveling. By noon that day, the phones at Birmingham Police Headquarters were not only ringing, they were flashing non-stop. Citizens called in, community leaders insisted on a press briefing, and journalists knocked on doors requesting documents. Somewhere inside the station, someone finally leaked a copy of Kevin's initial incident report, which was supposedly never submitted. It appeared mysteriously in Galloway's inbox via a secure channel without any sender identification. But its authenticity was unquestionable. The typed document was time-stamped the very night Eleanor hit the ground. It described her as verbally aggressive, non-compliant with lawful commands, and deliberately interfering physically with the officer's personal space. Terrell read the report aloud, visibly disturbed. "She is 5 feet 2 inches tall and 72 years old. Her interference was simply standing still while using a cane," he explained. "They are preparing a defense," said Galloway. "The usual exaggeration. They will claim she was obstructing and provoking, then shift blame onto her mental health." Bill hardly reacted, merely staring at the file as if trying to peer through it. Then he reached for his phone, this time calling someone connected not to the past, but to Eleanor's present. The nurse on duty the night Eleanor was brought in, Miss Wanda, said, "This is Kevin Baines." "Oh yes, dear. Your mother is doing all right. She ate a little bit this morning. I need a favor. Do you recall how she was when they wheeled her in? She was drowsy and kept asking for you. Was she hostile or combative?" Wanda seemed uncertain. "No, definitely not. She was frightened. Her blood pressure was extremely high. She could barely sit up. Could you please put that on record?" There was a pause. "Are you going to get me into trouble?" "No. I want to hold those who harmed my mother accountable. I just need your voice for one sentence. That is all." Another pause followed by a sigh. "All right, dear. I will say it by tonight." Kevin had audio from Wanda, 3 affidavits from church members who saw the event, and a timeline proving Mildred had already drawn his baton before Eleanor uttered a single word. Meanwhile, outside the police station, a small crowd began to assemble, not shouting, but standing silently holding signs with Eleanor's photo, some holding canes in quiet support. A young officer inside the station whispered to his partner, "Who is she?" The partner shrugged. "Just some woman. But her son, I heard he used to be special operations. Now he has people digging through our files." That night, a local reporter named Lee Torres broadcasted live from the sidewalk. She didn't yell or exaggerate. She simply presented the facts. An elderly woman injured at a traffic stop, a department slow to act, and a son determined not to let it slide. By 10 in the evening, it had reached regional news, then Reddit, then everywhere. A legal blog focusing on police misconduct cases was the turning point when internal cracks began to surface. Anonymous messages started arriving from dispatchers, former officers, and clerks. One urged a review of the logs from the 12th of September. 2 other reports concerned Detmer and remained confidential. Another mentioned body camera footage from that evening held back until Internal Affairs approved a statement. The most startling revelation came from a woman identified only as M. She claimed to have been engaged to a patrol sergeant once, and still had his tablet from when they lived together. The device had synced with the department's cloud storage, revealing the unedited video. It captured the exact moment when Detmer took Eleanor's cane, showing her fall without any sign of resistance or interference, simply standing there, and then bleeding. She had offered to surrender it with no demand for payment or reward, just one plea. "I want the world to know what he did." Mildred met her in a public park during daylight hours. She arrived carrying the tablet in a shopping bag, lacking both a charger and a protective case. She said, "Tell that woman I'm sorry no one intervened." He nodded and replied, "You just did." Back in the motel room, they watched the footage. It was clear with no edits or cuts, and the audio remained fully intact. Kevin viewed it once, then again, before clicking upload and sending it to 6 journalists, 1 from Alabama, 1 from Texas, and 4 from outlets that never looked away. As the pressure mounted, 2 hours later, the video went live, attracting 3,000 to 12,000 views within 4 hours. Suddenly, people didn't just care, they were furious. But fury alone would not suffice. The moment had come to reveal the truth at the very place where it began. Early the next morning, the main entrance of the Birmingham Police Department did not welcome the usual steady flow of early complaints and routine tasks. Instead, it opened to a press vehicle, a group of folding chairs, and a swelling crowd. At 8 o'clock in the morning, Kevin entered the station carrying 2 items, a hard drive and a folder filled with printed witness accounts. He was not there to excuse himself or to intimidate. His purpose was to present a choice. Lieutenant Green approached him in the corridor alongside a public relations representative who appeared exhausted. "Mr. Baines, now is really not the time," she said hesitantly. "Actually, it is the right time," Kevin interrupted. "Where is your chief?" she asked. "He is not here today," Green responded. "Then you are in charge for now," he said, folding his arms. "We are already examining everything, from the footage to the report." Kevin stopped him again. "I possess the original footage, statements from several eyewitnesses, and an attorney from the federal level ready to take serious action if you attempt to conceal any more documents." Green glanced toward the glass entrance where demonstrators held signs and some recorded the scene. "Would you prefer to speak privately?" the lieutenant offered. "No," Kevin replied. "I want you to witness this personally." He handed over the drive. Moments later, they sat in a cramped meeting room. The PR officer nervously typed on a laptop while the hard drive was connected to a monitor fixed to the wall. The room fell silent as the video played, revealing the events with undeniable clarity. Eleanor Baines stood silently as Bill Detmer nervously grabbed her cane. Her body collapsed like a marionette whose strings had been severed, her head hitting the curb. No struggle, no shouting, no wrongdoing. Only a 72-year-old woman treated as if she were expendable. When the screen went dark, silence filled the room until Kevin spoke. "Your officer lied. Your report is fiction, and your department tried to erase a woman who devoted her life to teaching 3rd graders and singing in the church choir." The PR officer began to respond, but Green raised a hand to stop her. "You are right," Green said softly but firmly. "There is no justification for what I just witnessed." Kevin leaned forward, and Green sighed. "What is it you want?" "I want Officer Detmer suspended without pay while a thorough investigation takes place. I want a personal apology to my mother, not a press statement but a face-to-face apology. I want the body camera footage released publicly. Also, I demand that your department re-examines every use of force case that has been closed in the last 3 years." The PR officer nearly choked in protest. "That is not how things work." Kevin looked at her calmly. "That is exactly how it will work." Green rubbed his face, appearing exhausted, worn down not only by the event but by bearing a burden he likely understood had been corrupt for longer than he wished to admit. "You will receive your apology," he assured. "Detmer will be suspended today, but I need time for the rest. You have 24 hours. Kevin added, "After that, the footage becomes national news, and a civil rights attorney ready to fight steps in." A federal claim was filed, yet Green did not respond. He merely nodded as Kevin stood up. "I appreciate your time, Lieutenant. Let us not waste any more of it," he said, leaving without offering a handshake. Outside, he ignored the crowd, did not raise his voice or issue any statements. He simply walked straight to the sidewalk where his mother had fallen and remained silent. Reporters shouted questions while people attempted to hand him flyers, embrace him, or ask about the next steps. But he said nothing. Inside the department, Green sank back into his chair, his head in his hands, fully aware this was far from over. That evening, the suspension was declared, and the department announced an internal inquiry regarding procedural failures. A spokesperson acknowledged the event fell short of the high standards expected from officers. However, it was the apology that mattered most to Eleanor. It arrived just after sunset. Mildred, visibly nervous and seemingly coached, stood in Eleanor's hospital room alongside two other officers and read from a prepared statement. "I am sorry for the harm caused, Mrs. Baines. It was never my intention." Eleanor fixed her gaze on him for a long moment before saying, "You may not have meant to hurt me, but you did." He looked away while she kept staring. But Kevin was not finished. With the truth finally revealed, it was time to ensure it would never be hidden again. The apology did not close the chapter. Rather, it confirmed what everyone had witnessed with their own eyes. The following morning, local news headlines announced that an innocent woman had been hurt, and the authorities attempted to conceal it. Officers were suspended after an elderly woman was injured during a stop, yet the words felt empty. There was no reference to the cover-up, no consequences for the supervisor who authorized the false report, and no clarification about why the body camera footage was hidden initially. Kevin sat next to Eleanor's hospital bed, holding her hand gently. "Are you sure you want to expose the rest of it?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "They still believe this will fade away, that people will forget." Eleanor gave a weak smile and said, "You are your father's son." He did not return the smile, already fixed on the next steps. By that afternoon, Galloway had assembled a detailed report. It outlined a timeline of 5 prior cases involving excessive force, all buried by administrative processes. Each incident followed a similar course. Physical harm occurred, no official charges were pressed, body cam footage was withheld, and complaints were dismissed as unproven. Different victims, the same police department, the same result. But this time, there was a name the city could not overlook: Eleanor Baines. Kevin took the files directly to City Hall. He did not arrange a meeting but walked in boldly. Security tried to stop him, yet a councilwoman named Dr. Eliza Monroe recognized him and stepped in, saying, "Let him speak. Everyone else is discussing him. We might as well hear from the source." In the small meeting room, Kevin calmly presented all the evidence. Clear no speeches, just facts, a department that shields itself at the expense of those it vowed to protect. He explained, "This is not about a single officer, it is about an entire mindset." One councilman shifted uneasily. "You want us to fire half the precinct?" "No." Kevin replied, "I am asking you to investigate them and to stop pretending that remaining silent means you are neutral." "Councilwoman." Monroe leaned forward. "What happens if we refuse?" Kevin did not hesitate. "Then we escalate a federal complaint, national news coverage, civil lawsuits from every victim I can uncover, and trust me, I will find them." There was no arrogance in his tone, only conviction. Later that evening, as city leaders argued behind closed doors, something unexpected unfolded outside the building. A crowd gathered on the steps, not large but persistent. Men and women of various ages, quiet, clutching candles, holding signs, some with copies of Eleanor's photograph, others carrying pictures of their own mothers. At the center stood Eleanor herself, supported on either side by church friends, her cane in one hand, her purse in the other. She spoke quietly, but each word was powerful. "I am not the first person this has happened to, and I might not be the last. But if being here makes the next woman safer, then I will stand until I cannot stand anymore." Applause followed, soft yet determined. No yelling, no anger, just people who have reached their limit. The following day, under growing pressure, the police chief declared his resignation, while 3 officers, including Kevin's immediate superior, were placed on administrative leave. An independent review panel was formed to investigate past misconduct allegations. The city attempted to present it as taking responsibility, but Kevin understood it was about survival. Later that night in the motel room, Galloway glanced at him and said, You could have gone nuclear and exposed everything openly. Kevin replied, I did not have to. The truth speaks louder than any outcry ever could. Mildred leaned back in her chair and asked, So, you are done? Kevin gazed out the window at the flickering lights across the street. No, just completed the first stage, he answered. He was not there for revenge. That was never his goal. His purpose was transformation, and transformation did not conclude with a single apology or one person stepping down. It began from that point. Sometimes, after the storm settles, you discover who genuinely stood by you and who was merely waiting for the turmoil to end. 3 weeks later, Eleanor Baines walked out of the hospital on her own, without any fuss. No cameras, just the gentle sound of her footsteps and the tapping of her cane on the pavement. Approaching the passenger side of Kevin's truck, she gripped the door handle with one hand, looked up at her son, and said, Help me in. Kevin reached down, not as a warrior or a fighter, but simply as a son. She eased into the seat, exhaling softly as she leaned back. Are you okay? He asked. I am better than before, she responded. That is all I need right now. The ride home was calm, through familiar streets and past familiar faces. People waved as they passed by. Not everyone understood the entire story, but they knew enough. And that was something new. Before, Eleanor had been just Miss Baines, the Sunday school teacher, and the retired third-grade educator who baked peach cobbler for funerals and never missed choir practice. Now others saw her in a different light. Some with admiration, others with remorse, and a few with a quiet respect that did not need words. When they arrived at the driveway of her small yellow home, the very same she had lived in since 1986, she paused to take a long look before stepping out. The yard was tidy, the porch freshly swept, and at the edge of the lot stood a brand-new mailbox, recently painted. I didn't do that, Kevin, she said after noticing her gaze. I know you didn't, he answered. A note was attached to the mailbox with a magnet shaped like a dove. It read, For Miss Eleanor, thank you for standing strong, and went on with a few more words. Eleanor smiled faintly. That was Mildred's handwriting. Inside the house, everything remained as she had left it, but somehow cozier. Several neighbors had visited while she was recovering. Meals were stored in the freezer, church bulletins stacked neatly by the phone, and someone had even changed the batteries in her wall clock. Kevin helped her settle onto the sofa, then pulled up a chair beside her. Are you going to stay for a bit? She asked. He nodded. She looked at him and said, You always disappear once things calm down, like you are scared of peace. I'm not scared, he replied. I just don't always recognize it. They sat quietly for a moment. Then Eleanor spoke. When your father died, I feared you would never find yourself again, that you would remain out there endlessly chasing after illusions. Kevin confessed. I tried. But they follow you wherever you go, she said softly. She nodded slowly. Not every shadow is harmful. Some simply show you where the light remains. Later that day, the doorbell chimed. Reverend Ingram stood there holding a folder. I thought you might want this, he said. It was the minutes from the church board meeting. They want to name the reading room after you. Eleanor chuckled. They better wait until I am gone. Reverend Ingram smiled. You don't get to decide that. As he turned to leave, he glanced at Kevin. She raised you well. Kevin said nothing, only gave a small, quiet nod. That night, as the sun dipped low, casting a gentle golden light through the lace curtains, Eleanor stood on her porch. Holding her cane in one hand and wrapped in a cozy blanket, a teenager walked along the sidewalk, one of the kids who used to mow lawns for spare change. He stopped and asked, You feeling all right, Miss Eleanor? She smiled. I'm still here. The boy nodded. Good. And then continued on his way. Kevin watched silently from the doorway. He didn't speak. He simply let her exist in that moment because sometimes recovery is quiet. It is not about loud declarations or big transformations. Sometimes healing is a calm day, a steady cane, a warm meal, a look that says, We see you now. Yet, even as peace settled, Kevin understood that this peace needed guarding, since silence does not always equal safety. Silence does not always bring justice. Approximately 6 weeks after Eleanor's fall, the buzz had mostly quieted down. The media attention shifted elsewhere. The hashtag faded from popularity, and the city issued a 5-page update promising reforms, new training programs, and greater openness. However, Kevin understood the reality behind such declarations. Vows did not change individuals, and systems did not heal themselves. It always depended on persistent pressure and constant vigilance. Sitting on the front porch of his mother's house, he observed the wind rustling through the branches. A notebook rested on his knees, half filled with scribbles of names, times, and street locations from other incidents he had uncovered since everything began. He did not see himself as a hero. He was simply attentive. Mildred came outside carrying 2 mugs of coffee and offered one to him. "Are they still contacting you?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes, lawyers, reporters, a few families, including a woman whose daughter suffered hearing loss in one ear after a police officer slammed her head against a window. She never received an apology." Eleanor settled next to him. "Will you help her?" she inquired. "I already forwarded her all my information," he answered. She gave an approving nod. "That's good. Just don't forget to take care of yourself as well." He did not respond immediately. "Then I will just rest," she said. "Not yet," Kevin replied. Eleanor gazed toward the street. "It's strange," she said, "how quickly the world forgets." "They did not forget you," Kevin countered. "No, but I was fortunate. Some people do not have sons who know how to fight without resorting to violence." He looked at her. "You were not lucky." "You were right," she whispered. Later in the afternoon, they went to visit the church. For the first time since the event, it was an ordinary Sunday with a modest crowd, mostly consisting of older individuals. Reverend Ingram welcomed everyone at the entrance and personally escorted Eleanor to her seat, while Kevin remained standing at the back. A few people quietly approached, expressing their gratitude not only for his mother, but also for making them feel acknowledged. After the service, a woman named Bernice, who appeared to be in her 60s and clutched her purse as if it held something delicate, pulled him aside. She said, "I saw how you handled everything with grace and determination." He was at a loss for words. "You reminded me that true strength does not always mean shouting," she added. "Sometimes it is about stillness, attention, and standing firm." Kevin finally replied, "I did not want any attention." "I understand," she responded. "That is why people trusted you in your hometown." Eleanor sat down with a bundle of letters from strangers all over the nation. Some contained prayers, others shared personal experiences. Every letter was signed as if the sender longed to be recognized. She read each one aloud with care, because sometimes being listened to is the crucial first step toward healing. That evening, Kevin wandered through the neighborhood. The sky was dark, but the air was peaceful. A few porch lights flickered softly like silent guardians. He paused beneath the street lamp near the corner store, standing quietly for some time. He reflected on what might have happened, what nearly occurred. He considered how a single action, a single push, a single falsehood, or a single voice can extend its effects far beyond the instant it takes place. He reflected on Eleanor, the way she stood her ground, the way she never raised her voice, the way she only ever asked for a single phone call. That one call transformed everything, because justice does not always come through courts or headlines. Sometimes it begins with a quiet voice declaring no more. This story was not about revenge. It was not about control. It was about significance, the significance of a woman's life. The significance of a son's decision to refuse to look away, the significance of standing firm when the world expects silence. And perhaps most importantly, it was about this reality: you don't need to be loud to be noticed. You don't have to fight with your fists to make an impact, and you don't have to wear a uniform to protect those you care about. So if you are watching this feeling weary, feeling upset, wondering if speaking out is worth it when the system seems too huge, let Mildred's courage remind you a single voice can be powerful, especially when that voice speaks the truth. Do not stay silent, someone is listening. Subscribe for more meaningful true stories, and never forget the strength of one voice.